Thanks for checking out SYMFONI on YouTube. Please be sure to subscribe and like our videos for updates.
Controversy that continues to trail the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, particularly the aspect of, or that insertion or removal rather, of the electronic transmission of results. We see the civil society continues to talk about that, and right now they are 42 civil societies are currently protesting against voice voting when it comes to the Electoral Act. Tell us your thoughts about this.
I think the passage of the new Electoral Act is something that is going to be a major test for the credibility of the National Assembly and for democracy in Nigeria. So I believe that the Electoral Act should be passed with a provision for electronic transmission of results. I believe that the voting process in the National Assembly should be as credible as possible, and that voice votes may not be very accurate. You know, votes should be recorded by members of the National Assembly clearly for the record, especially on such an important issue as how we conduct Nigeria's elections. So, you know, I think there's no two ways about it. It's make or break for the National Assembly as far as the Electoral Amendment Act is concerned. So everybody's watching. We will see whether we have a National Assembly worth its name, or whether it's just going to betray itself and its mandate and the people of Nigeria that they're supposed to represent. That's my thought initially.
Now, Professor, two things stand out from what you've said. I mean, the political interest of the ruling class, and of course the interests of the citizens. The ruling class it is that is going to discuss the issues and eventually pass the bill. Do you see the current ruling class in the National Assembly, even the executive as well, supporting what the citizens actually want in this particular instance?
We are very deeply concerned. You know, I am the founder of To Build a Nation, one of those civil society groups that have been protesting very vigorously for a transparent and accountable democracy in Nigeria. And we do believe that the political class in Nigeria, at least in our experience, has not shown itself to be aligned with the people. Democracy is supposed to be a government. For what we have in Nigeria so far is politicians. And I think this is a very unique opportunity we have to make our democracy serve the people, not the politicians. We must not let this opportunity slip us by. We must not allow the people of Nigeria to be shortchanged by any vested, corrupt political interest. We're in this fight, and it's going to be a big fight. Because it's make or break, like I said. This is it. You know, if we do not get an amended Electoral Act that provides for the electronic transmission of results, what it means is that some people want to rig elections in 2023. We must not allow this to happen. And I'm very glad that Nigerians are speaking up, civil society organizations are speaking up, National Assembly members have heard very clearly the voice of Nigerians. Let's see whether a small minority or some vested interests will be able to turn the National Assembly away from the voice of the people. That day will live in infamy if it were ever to happen.
Professor Moghalu, interest is, it's a big word when it comes to politics. Politics, they say, is a game of numbers, and interest is where a politician always aligns at the end of the day. And looking at the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, the interest, again, of the political class and the political elite vis-a-vis the interest for Nigeria is what, we need to determine at this point. Do you see the 9th National Assembly rising above personal and political interest, and putting the interest of the nation, in the front of everything that they are doing, particularly concerning this bill?
I think they certainly should. There are moments in history, that test the souls of men. There are moments in history that test the legacy of all of us as human beings. And so I would say to the members of the National Assembly, history is watching you. History is being recorded. Nigerians are watching. And anybody who does not support or who opposes the provision for electronic transmission of votes, the results of elections in Nigeria, is an enemy of democracy. Do you want to be an enemy of democracy when history is written? Or do you want to be a friend of democracy when history is written? So I would say to the members of the National Assembly, this is a very momentous issue. Make no mistake about it. This is not some ordinary political matter. It's about the history of Nigeria. There are moments in the history of Nigeria that we all remember. They will be taught in schools. They will be remembered forever by the citizens of Nigeria. This is one of such moments. And regardless of any temptation, let it be said of every member of the National Assembly that they stood on the better side of history, that they stood on the side of the people on this particular issue. More broadly, I think that if anybody votes against the electronic transmission of results, I believe that the citizens that represent or from where that legislator comes from should begin a process of recall for such a legislator, certainly, because that's a betrayal of the principles of democracy, one of which is, transparency in elections. So our democracy for too long has been just one ritual. Every 4 years we have elections, but they're not transparent. The will of the people is not truly reflected. This is the time for us to become mature. Let's stop being children. After 22 years as a democracy since 1999, it's time for us to show that we're actually making progress, with this bill. So, I'm just hoping that the legislatures will do the right thing and not further erode the credibility of the National Assembly, which is already undermined. Many people feel that the National Assembly is not an independent institution. We've seen a number of other things they're doing, trying to put people into the Electoral Commission who have no business being there. And people are wondering, is this really a legislature or is it some extension of the executive? So yeah, that's what I would say. We don't want to perpetuate election rigging.
Professor, beyond the National Assembly, what exactly do you think the role of the executive should be? Beyond, waiting for the bill to get to it and the head of the executive appends his signature of assent on the bill? Because I remember prior to 2019, there were some far-reaching amendments made to the electoral bill at the time, Electoral Act at the time. It went to the president, I think, sometime in December 2018. Before that December 2018, it had actually been sent to the president a couple of times, which the president declined assent. Until the third time it was sent to the president, he still declined assent with the excuse that it was too close to the election. So allow this election to go by, then we're going to look at it. A lot of people also expected that the executive having, especially the president, Muhammadu Buhari, having himself admittedly said over the years that the electoral process hasn't really been fair to him, would himself had personally forwarded the bill, or but maybe using the executive, any of his ministers, forwarded the bill to the National Assembly, amending certain sections of the Electoral Act, which he perceives to not really help in the electoral process. None of that has been done. The executive hasn't done that. But now we are getting to this point where the National Assembly is on the spotlight, but we're hearing silence on the part of the executive. Do you think the president at this point, being the head of a political party that dominates the National Assembly should say something that inspires confidence to the effect that he is particularly personally interested in ensuring a smooth and effective, credible reform of the electoral law?
One of the roles of a president, one of the roles of leadership, perhaps, one of the most important ones for a president of Nigeria is that the president should promote through his or her leadership the building of strong and effective institutions. And so even though the president is not a member of the National Assembly, under the Constitution, the executive arm of government can bring an executive bill to the National Assembly and ask the National Assembly to pass it. I think this is an important opportunity for President Muhammadu Buhari to, again, like I said, it's an opportunity to write his name in history. He failed to approve the previous amendments. He's no longer on the ballot in 2023. I would urge him, and we have enough time, it's 2 years now to 2023 elections. I would urge the president to speak up on this issue and to support very expressly, urge the members of the National Assembly, just as an expression of his opinion, not that he is ordering them because they are supposed to be independent, but as a leader of Nigeria, as the ultimate leader of Nigeria, the president should express his support for the passage of an amended Electoral Act that includes the electronic transmission of voting results. There's no question in my mind. It's a moment for leadership. And if I were the president of Nigeria, that is exactly what I would do. I would support the call for electronic transmission of results because we know that that will very significantly reduce the rigging of elections. And by so doing, we will give many more people confidence. Many people today in Nigeria are apathetic. They have lost confidence. They've lost their belief that our democracy works. They will tell you that the vote does not count. And to be able to turn this situation around, we must include this provision for electronic transmission of results.
Prof, I want to quickly go back to something you said earlier about, electorates recalling their representatives where they have failed to represent them properly at the National Assembly. Access is calling for a clause-by-clause adoption, in the process of finalizing the Electoral Amendment Bill. And just like we see in other climes, each representative shall get up and say whether they are for or they are against, so that their people can know how exactly they should vote. I mean, this is admirable and this is desirable, but do you see it happening?
Well, we can always be surprised, but the quality of the deliberations of our democratic institutions has not always been at the level that we would like to see it. So I certainly support a clause-by-clause vote, and that each member should very clearly indicate where he or she stands on these issues. Yes, like I said, this bill, it's a historic issue. I want to remind members of the National Assembly, do not think this is politics as usual. If you do, you're making a very big mistake. This is a historic bill, and history will record where you stood on it. So I would certainly support access, the civil society groups who are certainly calling for, very clear on this bill. Yes, I support that. Whether it will happen or not, well, we'll have to wait and see.
Professor, you've said before that our current crisis, that Nigeria is in a crisis, and in fact, the current crisis is a direct result of electoral decisions and leadership choices made collectively, and elections have consequences. The real path forward, therefore, is a change of leadership in another election. And the question has always been the reality and the assumptions on how these leadership changes should take place with an electoral legal framework that really a lot of people would question the content and whether or not it can really deliver the goods at the end of the day. You contested in 2019, the presidency in 2019. What did you identify to be the fault lines as far as this legal framework and the entire process indeed, and what needs to be corrected beyond some of the issues we've highlighted so far in the Electoral Amendment Bill?
Well, first of all, the most important thing that I identified as a candidate in the presidential election in 2019 is that the voting process, the voting count, and the collation of results is not transparent at all. I know, as a matter of fact, that the results that were credited to me were not the results that I achieved in the election. I know that, because in some polling, in some collation centers where we had people who were looking in on our behalf, I was getting reports on the numbers of votes that were being accredited to me as a candidate. And that was very different from what INEC announced as the numbers that my political party at that time got in those elections. So this is one of the things we think that this electronic transmission of results will help achieve. So we come back to this issue. It's the biggest issue. There are other issues of security at polling booths. There was a lot of electoral violence in many places. I think we should create a very clear framework to avoid this. Two, there should be consequences, strong consequences, electoral accountability for malfeasance in elections, whether by INEC officials, whether by political party agents, whether by individual citizens. Any attempt to disrupt the elections or to cheat should create accountability that people can see. If you come and shoot somebody today, the police will most likely show up and arrest you. Why is it that people commit crimes at elections and we don't hear anything about accountability? I would also say that one of the things I noticed was that INEC's preparedness for the 2019 elections was just not where it should have been. So I believe that INEC today is trying hard to improve on its performance in the 2019 elections. I congratulate them for beginning the continuous voter registration, and I urge them to really make sure that this process goes very smoothly. The other area where I will also challenge INEC to rise in its performance, in addition to logistics, to project management, to managing the risks that could disrupt smooth elections, is in the area of voter education. I don't think INEC is doing enough in the area of voter education. Nigeria's democracy, any democracy, presumes that citizens are making informed decisions, presumes that citizens know what issues they should be looking out for in selecting their leaders. But
it looks like we lost network connection there. Professor Moghalu, are you there? Can you hear me? All right, we'll take a moment to catch up with Professor Moghalu in a moment. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Professor Moghalu, can you hear us now?
Yes, I'm sorry that the line cut off. Yeah. But I was saying that, in addition to the issues we're discussing about the electronic transmission of votes, there are other areas that INEC needs to work on. I talked about INEC and other agencies like the police, the security of electoral processes and voting booths. I talked about logistical preparedness by INEC. And I'm talking about, voter education. A lot of civil society organizations, such as To Build a Nation, TBAN, the one that I am a convener of, together with many other Nigerians, we believe that the education of the Nigerian voter is a critical need for the elections going forward in this country. Nigeria's voters, many people are poor, many people are illiterate. They don't even have a sense of the basis on which they should be selecting candidates. And of course, one of the major issues that we identified in the 2019 elections was vote buying. So when people's votes are being bought, it's not a democracy. I'm sorry, that is not a democracy.
Professor Moghalu, let me quickly take you through something you also mentioned earlier at the beginning of our conversation, the screening of President's media aide Lauretta Onochie as National Commissioner of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. I'm just going to simply ask you, what are your major concerns about Onochie as a national electoral commissioner? You and so many others have complained about this media aid to the president.
Yes, I think the mere nomination of someone with that profile should not even have taken place at all in the first place. Second, the National Assembly should not be screening her because the National Assembly should act in compliance with the laws of Nigeria. The National Assembly should have been able to say to the president, sorry, this nomination on a number of counts does not meet the requirements of the law for someone to be a member of INEC. She clearly is a political partisan. There's no way, everybody knows that. Her record says it, a lot of digital footprints of her statements. We have seen evidence or records floating around about her membership of the party. And she's been extremely partisan in the way she has conducted herself. So even for the president to nominate her, it raises a lot of questions in my mind. Also, the process did not go through the constitutionally required elements. For example, nominating the members of the Electoral Commission have to first present it to the National Council of State. This was not done, obviously. So there are so many grounds on which this is just not acceptable. And I saw the other day that the former INEC chairman, Professor Atahiru Jega, also raised very strong concerns about the nomination of this particular individual. I think it will destroy confidence. Whatever confidence is left in INEC will be destroyed if this woman is confirmed as an electoral commissioner, because it means that partisan politicians are being inserted into INEC, and that is clearly the beginning of the death of democracy in Nigeria. So it should not happen, in my view.